ChatGPT said. The train sighed into the station like an old beast, steam drifting across the platform and curling around the boots of strangers. Clara Whitfield stepped down with her small valise clutched to her chest, her gloved fingers trembling though the morning air was warm. She had come across half the country with a promise in her heart, a promise written in the neat, slanted script of a man she had never met. She had polished her shoes until her reflection wavered in the leather. She had sewn her dress twice over on the rattling journey, each stitch an attempt to ready herself for the life awaiting her. The life did not come. Jedediah Boone stood at the edge of the platform, broad as a barn door, his vest straining against his belly. His eyes flicked over her like a merchant examining flawed goods. He frowned, turned his head slightly, and whispered to the woman beside him, her sister, Eleanor. Clara's stomach dropped. Eleanor's cheeks flushed crimson, but she did not move away. She let Jed's heavy gaze rest on her. In the silence that followed, Clara felt the weight of every eye in the town press against her back. "Too plain," someone muttered. Another voice, sharp and high, added, "Not the bride he was promised." The name Mrs. Hattie Caldwell floated through the air like a bad odor. Clara's ears burned. She had not thought rejection could be so public, so swift. Jed Boone extended his hand, not to her, but to Eleanor, and in that moment Clara became a shadow. Eleanor did not resist. Clara could see the battle flicker in her sister's eyes. Hesitation, guilt, something like shame, but it was gone in an instant. Eleanor's hand settled into Jed's large palm, and the deal was done before Clara even drew her next breath. "Where will you go?" a small voice asked. Clara turned to find a boy of 9 staring up at her. His eyes were the pale blue of spring water, too honest to lie. He clutched a ragged hat against his chest. Later she would learn his name was Jonah, Jed Boone's orphan nephew. For now, she could only shake her head, unable to form words, as though her voice had been taken from her along with her future. The crowd dispersed quickly, gossip already flaring like sparks. Clara remained rooted until the train hissed away and silence returned to the platform. She stood alone, the dust of its departure settling around her like ash. Days bled into one another. She rented a narrow bed at the inn, eating bread gone stale before nightfall, listening to the creak of footsteps in the hallway as laughter drifted up from the saloon across the street. She avoided the market, but whispers found her anyway. The unwanted bride, the plain sister, the fool who thought herself worthy. Her coin thinned. Her pride thinned faster. One evening, driven by a need to breathe air not thick with judgment, she wandered beyond the town's edge. The sky was bruised purple, the earth cracked and dry, the kind of land that punished weakness. She followed the sound of trickling water and found a shallow creek bed, its surface glimmering faintly. And there he was. A giant of a man stood bent over the water, filling a clay jug. His shoulders seemed carved from stone, his hair streaked with gray, though his stance carried the weight of strength undiminished. Scars marked his arms like maps of battle survived. He turned when she stepped on a branch, the sound sharp in the quiet evening. His gaze held hers, steady, unreadable. Fear jolted through her, but not the kind that bids one run. It was the awe of encountering something elemental, a storm, a mountain. He did not move closer. He merely tilted the jug, offering. The water shone in the last light of day. Clara's lips were dry, her throat burning, but pride rooted her feet. Yet when he set the jug on the ground and stepped back, she found herself kneeling, drinking, her reflection trembling in the ripples beside his towering frame. She whispered a thank you, unsure if he understood. He gave no reply, only a nod before he disappeared into the trees. She thought of him often afterward. She learned his name, Taza, spoken in half-whispers in town. That Apache giant, Mrs. Caldwell, spat one morning at the market. Lives like a wild dog in that broken cabin by the creek. Clara felt heat rise to her face, but said nothing. Gossip clung tighter when resisted. Yet she baked bread that week, coarse but warm, and left it near the cabin's door. She returned the next day to find it gone. This became their unspoken rhythm. a shawl mended with stitches not her own, a bundle of herbs left where her bread had vanished. She began to look for his shadow when the sun dipped low, her heart lifting at the smallest glimpse. The town noticed. They always noticed. Mrs. Caldwell's tongue sharpened, striking like a snake. Better the unwanted bride keep company with savages than shame our men again. Even Eleanor, pale with her own discontent, begged Clara quietly to stop. Jed is furious. He says you tarnish his name. His name was never mine to bear, Clara replied, though the words quivered. It was on an evening heavy with dust that she found herself again at the creek, the water barely moving, as though it too held its breath. Taza sat by the bank, sharpening a blade with slow, deliberate strokes. She sat near, not close enough to touch, but nearer than before. I am too old for love, he said at last, his voice deep as the earth itself. The words were not bitter, merely final, like a door closing. Clara looked at his hands, the scars that told of years beyond hers, and then at her own, soft, uncertain, trembling but still alive. She felt the weight of her rejection, the laughter of the town, the sting of being left with nothing. Yet in his presence, she felt something stir that had long slept. I've waited my whole life for you, she whispered, surprising even herself. The air seemed to thicken, the silence between them alive with something unspoken. He paused, the blade still in his hand, his eyes lifting to hers. A wolf howled in the distance, thin and haunting. She did not know if he believed her words, or if she even believed them yet herself. But the moment lingered, delicate as spun glass, daring to exist in a world that had already judged them both. And as the sky bruised darker and the creek whispered low, Clara realized her heart was no longer tethered to the shame of that platform. It was tethered to this silence, this man, this fragile beginning. She did not yet know if it could survive the world outside the trees. But the world was already stirring. A lantern's glow flickered in the distance, moving steadily toward them. Someone was coming. The lantern swung like a fiery eye in the night, its glow staggering through the mesquite until it revealed the heavy frame of Jedediah Boone. His breath came ragged, sour with whiskey, his boots crushing twigs that had lain untouched for seasons. Behind him stumbled two ranch hands, their shadows stretching across the creek bed like grasping fingers. Clara stiffened where she sat, her body trembling, but Taza rose with a calmness that seemed carved from the earth itself. His massive form blocked the firelight, casting her into the safety of shadow. So it's true, Jed slurred, his gaze catching on Clara as though she were a thorn in his side. The unwanted bride seeks company where no decent woman would. His laugh was bitter, forced, a sound meant for his men as much as for her. Clara wanted to speak, to defend, but shame sealed her lips. The words she had offered Taza earlier, words of longing, of defiance against loneliness, shrank inside her chest. Yet when she looked up at him, she saw no shame in his eyes, only a steadiness that invited her to borrow strength. Jed lifted the lantern higher, its light trembling over Taza's scars. Savage, he spat. You think to shame me further after I took her sister into my house. His voice broke, half fury, half desperation. Do you know what they call me now in town? Fat fool. Wife thief. Mocked, all because this cast-off couldn't keep her place. The ranch hands muttered, uneasy. They had come expecting fear, perhaps violence to feed their master's pride, but here was a giant standing as unmovable as a mountain, and a woman who, though trembling, did not run. From the brush came a rustle. Clara's heart lurched until she saw a smaller shadow step forward. Jonah, barefoot, his hair tousled by night air, clutched his hat to his chest. His voice, though thin, cut through the tension. Uncle Jed, he said, she's kinder than both of you put together. Silence fell heavy. Jed's jaw clenched, but his nephew's words lodged deeper than any blade. Taza did not move, though Clara could feel the storm in his stillness, every muscle coiled, prepared to shield. Go home, boy, Jed growled, his voice faltering. Jonah shook his head. She gave me bread when Aunt Eleanor wouldn't let me near her stove. She listens. She smiles. I'd rather call her kin than anyone in that house. His words carried a raw innocence that even drunkenness could not drown. Eleanor appeared then, her figure rushing from the darkness, hair unpinned, breathless. "Jed, stop this madness," she cried, seizing his arm. "What shame are you so afraid of? You think marrying me fixed it? You think mocking her makes you more of a man?" Her voice cracked, but she pressed on, her face pale with anguish. "You can't chain pride to a woman's body. You can't fill your emptiness with cruelty." Jed wrenched free, rage sparking in his eyes. Yet even his fury faltered when faced with both wife and child. He raised his rifle anyway, the barrel shaking in unsteady hands. Clara's breath caught, but before fear could hollow her, Taza stepped forward. He did not raise a weapon. He simply moved his body between her and the gun, his chest rising slow, his silence louder than any threat. "Shoot him and you'll kill more than a man," Eleanor said, her voice trembling yet sharp. "You'll kill the last scrap of decency you've left." The ranch hands shifted uneasily, no longer certain which side they stood upon. The fire crackled on the cabin's edge where one torch had fallen, sending up a hiss of smoke. For a moment it seemed the night itself held its breath, waiting to see if blood would spill. Jed's arm wavered. His nephew's stare, his wife's defiance, the giant's unflinching calm. Together they stripped him bare. The rifle sagged, the fury in his eyes collapsing into something hollower, more dangerous, shame. He dropped the weapon to the dirt with a dull thud. Without a word, he turned, stumbling back through the mesquite, his men trailing uncertainly behind. Eleanor watched him go, tears streaking her cheeks, while Jonah clung to Clara's skirt, seeking comfort she hardly knew she could give. The flames near the cabin licked higher. Taza moved swiftly now, shoveling dirt and stamping embers until only smoke curled in the night air. Clara helped with bare hands, smudging her dress with ash, her lungs burning. When the last spark died, silence returned, broken only by the faint trickle of the creek. She looked at him then, his great chest heaving, his face lined with exhaustion and something gentler beneath. He had not spoken a word, yet he had spoken everything. Clara felt her shame peel away like bark stripped from a tree, leaving her raw, exposed but alive. Jonah clutched her hand. "Don't let them send you away," he whispered. "Please stay." His small voice carried the weight of a child's truth, unvarnished and undeniable. Eleanor approached, her eyes red, her hands trembling. She opened her mouth as if to apologize, to confess, but no words came. Instead, she bowed her head to Clara, a gesture of defeat, of reluctant respect. Then she turned and followed the path her husband had taken, vanishing into the dark. Clara stood in the clearing, ash on her dress, Jonah's hand in hers, Taza's presence beside her like a fortress. The night smelled of smoke and earth, of endings and beginnings. She did not know what the town would say come morning, whether gossip would sharpen or soften. But she knew this. She was no longer the woman who had stepped off the train with trembling hands. She had endured the fire, and though her heart still ached, it beat stronger now. Taza finally spoke, his voice low, almost a growl. "They will come again." Clara met his eyes, steady this time, her voice firm. "Then we will face them." The word surprised her, but once spoken they felt truer than anything she had said in years. She saw the flicker in his gaze, of recognition, perhaps even the seed of belief that he was not too old for love, not too broken for companionship. Above them, the stars burned cold and eternal, but Clara felt warmth pulse between them, fragile yet real. The cabin loomed behind, scarred by smoke but standing still. She imagined rebuilding it, stone by stone, not as his or hers, but as theirs. Jonah yawned, leaning against her, his small body heavy with trust. Taza bent, lifted the boy easily into his arms, and in that gesture something shifted, like the ground beneath them settling after a quake. Clara walked beside him toward the cabin, the night folding around them like a cloak. At the threshold, Taza paused, his massive frame silhouetted against the starlight. His eyes searched hers, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to that single, silent exchange. She felt the whisper of the word she had spoken earlier. "I've waited my whole life for you," return like an echo, now heavier, more dangerous, more true. Inside, the cabin smelled of ash and smoke, but it was still a place to be. She stepped through the door, her heart pounding, aware that by crossing, she chose more than shelter. She chose him. She chose the fight. She chose to stay. Outside, far off, the distant echo of hooves stirred again, faint but certain. The night's reprieve was only borrowed. Clara knew their story was far from finished. The conflict had only just begun.